You build this really large outer tension with the story, but then there's all these small details, like when we have characters arguing, are we going to walk 5 minutes down the road, or are we going to drive and have to find parking? And I love the way that you constantly play with the levels of it, and I was interested in how you approached that in the script writing process and then carried that through into filmmaking and editing.
Oh, wow, okay. Hi, everybody. So, let's see. Well, you know, we knew we were basically presenting one type of story for the first 45 minutes and then quickly, abruptly ending that and getting into a totally different story and style. And from that point on, it was really just about momentum, you know, driving the story forward while we're looking for Yvonne. Which, you know, working with my wonderful cinematographer, Drew Daniels, we said that from the point of, you know, starting that home invasion onward, and especially when they leave the mansion, the camera is always moving. And it doesn't become static again until pretty much the end when they're back at the mansion talking. The camera is always moving, whether it's a dolly, Steadicam, handheld, or you know, a car mount in which the car is moving. So it's driving us forward, and I think that's part of it, and also just finding the rhythm ultimately in post-production. I mean, you know, that's where you write the script for the third time, essentially, and figuring out the beats, figuring out if it's flowing. And I edit on my own, so I think it's me finding it ultimately there.
I love that. And Mikey, I mean, there's so much preparation that you did for this role, and I wanted to start by talking about a lot of the internal prep for this character, because there's so much underneath the surface, and every time we see that really tough exterior or those defense mechanisms that kick in, it always comes from somewhere in her past or an experience that she's had. And I was interested in how you approached kind of building all of this history and all of this subtext of emotion that's always bubbling underneath the surface that she's trying to conceal, because it does sneak out in these really small, beautiful ways.
Oh, well, thank you. Also, hi, everybody. Yeah, Annie is somebody who definitely has created this harder outer shell. I think she's protecting herself a lot. There are times where she's playing a character, this different version of herself, especially because of her work and what she does for a living. But even within all of that hardness, I wanted you to see the vulnerability underneath her. I wanted you to see in those private moments, like you mentioned, some of that come out. So even whilst she's angry or defensive or all of those things, no one is just angry or just defensive. There's always a reason for it. There's always a deeper meaning and a vulnerability. And so I just spent a long time thinking about that, thinking about her as a person, asking myself many questions about her. You know, I was just, I guess, doing my job as an actor and trying to really get to understand her and who she is and what her morals are. Yeah, so I asked myself many, many questions, and over time was just able to get to the root of who she is, so that all of the little pieces of preparation I did were able to come together and create her as a whole.
I love that. And Yura, for Igor, he's so protective of ANORA and wants her to be safe in so many ways. But I love that you were so protective and wanted Mikey to feel safe when you were filming together. Just little things like filming the fight sequence and, you know, trying to help her fix her nail when it broke. And I wanted to ask about the way that you feeling so protective over Mikey as a person became Igor being so protective over ANORA.
It was our secret about nail. I don't know, everybody knows about it already. But I don't know, it's film, it's Sean's film, and it's very important for Sean and for Mikey, and it was my goal just trying to help them, and it's at the same time it's a central figure, center of this character, and it's very simple, and I'm happy to be part of this, and you know what I mean.
No, your performance is so great. And Mark, I heard that you and Sean talked a lot about the idea of Vanya being this child alone in this mansion. And emotionally, he's so much like a child, but also physically, he kind of feels like a child in many ways as well. And I was curious how the idea of him feeling like this lonely child really shaped a lot of who he was.
Have you saw this mansion? You know, if even adult people will be alone in this mansion, he will be like a child, because mansion is a huge, and you're like just a person, you're a small person, this big mansion. Honestly, it was a big challenge to, firstly to go to America and work with Sean Baker and Mikey Madison, and of course Karen Kragula and watch the message. It was very scary, but the biggest challenge was to, build this like bad guy in some way to to believe in the very beginning that it's a amazing and very funny person. And we discussed with Sean his pain and his dream, and we tried to find the way why Annie has to fall in love with him, not only because of money, because it wasn't the Sean's script, and we understood that he has to be like a kid, just like a kid, because when you have no strong love connection with your family, you're stuck in this period when you are the kid and you are alone and you don't know how you can behave yourself. And because of it, we did all this stuff with a body, with a slide and with a backflip and this. It's amazing that you're laughing. I just said backflip and wow, it's crazy. Thank you.
Say it again.
Backflip. Yeah, it works.
Karen, I love how much tension there is in your character, but it's because the stakes are so real for him. There's that moment where he kind of says something about, if I don't get them to annul this marriage or get divorced, then I'll be killed or my wife will never hear from me again. And I was curious about how that created a lot of the stress and tension that really plays in a comedic way, but because it's so truthful for your character.
Yeah, it was important for me to portray this character, first of all, as a responsible person, because he's christening a child in church, he's taking responsibility over this child. So of course he might come across as someone who could be violent, and he probably could be, but I wanted to make sure that he's responsible in the amount of violence he uses, right? The way I would. And plus the sense of humor. I mean, he's a guy who lives with his life with humor, and he doesn't probably, joke around, but everything has a little bit of fun to the way he does things. And I feel like he's a good guy. He's just dealing with the circumstances on the most important day of his year, because he's being a godfather in the church, and it's like a big deal in Armenian culture. And he has to deal with his boss, he could get fired, his family's well-being is in jeopardy, so yeah, he's very determined to find Ivan and solve the problem.
And Sean, I also wanted to ask about the way that you've used the camera in directing to frame ANORA and to frame Igor specifically, because I love how much ANORA carries the frame of this story, and yet as the story develops and we get into kind of that act after the home invasion, there's all these really beautiful moments where you frame it on Mikey and then we pan over and we see Igor just making all these small glances, and it feels so intentional, not just in the first watching, but each time you rewatch it, you find all these little moments, like if she looks at him, he looks away and you catch it. And so how did you set about framing it in that way, but also think about the rewatching experience for audiences?
Well, quite honestly, even I was finding some of that in post-production, because these two gave me such amazing, consistently subtle performance throughout the whole film. That was happening, and sometimes I was not even focused on on those little glances here and there, but they were happening, and I was finding them in post. But no, for the most part, we're using this 2:3:5 aspect ratio, widescreen aspect ratio, which would allow us to have a focal point in the center of the frame, which was sometimes Vache holding the phone there while Mark is yelling into it, but on the right and left of the frame, you're probably not on the first viewing watching that, but yeah, there are those little, if you see that one scene, Yura is staring over at Mikey, and then Mikey feels that, looks over, and quickly Yura looks down. You know, there's a lot of that going on, and I think it just comes from also my actors really being just always in character, and really everybody being in sync and being in the moment. And then, of course, you know, we are building up to something at the end of the film, and we didn't want to, and we had to find that in post-production, because, you know, they gave me these performances, and it was really up to me, especially with Yura's character of Igor, to be like, how long do I hold on him without it showing our hand, you know, and that was really figured out pretty much in post.
And Mikey, in talking about ANORA's relationship with Vanya, you know, he comes into the club and kind of disarms her in a way. And it's interesting because he's so much younger than any of the other customers that are usually in the space and that she usually gets to interact with. And so we start to see that, yes, it's a business for her, but also there's this genuine flirtation when they're talking about potential rates. It's like she's also disarmed. And there's this beautiful moment where in the New Year's Eve scene, you're counting down, and she kind of forgets the countdown at one moment because she notices him. And so how did you and Mark really set about creating this connection where it starts as one thing and then becomes something very different?
I think that it was there, and we also created a friendship that we were able to work off of. And I think when we first met, we were just making each other laugh, and so we had, I think, the base for that kind of chemistry. But I felt that something was shifting while we were filming, where, I mean, you see these characters really having fun together and connecting and having this incredible time, which I think definitely blurs the lines for Annie between client and also someone who she might really potentially date in her normal life. And so I think that becomes, it blurs the lines, you know? Sorry, what was the other part of your question?
No, it was really just about, you know, kind of the way that it starts as one thing and then becomes something very different, which I think you really speak to.
Yeah, but no, I think that Yvonne invites Annie into his life in this very grand, exciting way, and I think that she falls in love with the idea of this fairy tale life that she may get to live with him, and I think she also is aware of the possibility, or is hopeful that there will be real love in the future, or that she sees that as something that could happen between them. But she has definitely fallen in love with the fantasy.
Mark, I've heard you say that you feel like for Vanya, for Yvonne, that he's falling in love for the first time, that this is his first love that he finds and then he loses, and, you know, he doesn't necessarily know how to handle it right, but he really wants to try and make her happy. Was that something that you and Sean talked about a lot, or how did that help you with building the relationship?
Backflip. We, in one moment, we just felt it. Because, you know, it was accidentally, or maybe not accidentally, but we shot some scenes in the mansion in the order, yes, and in one moment we understood that, yes, he really believed in it, and he really want to, you know, save it somehow. Yeah, and it was amazing that everything happened there on the set, and we just, because of magic of Sean, he really I don't know why, but he really trusts us in some reason, and because of it we had lots of space to improvisation and to, you know, exploring and discovering something inside our characters and inside the chemistry between all these people. Yeah, and what was the question? Sorry, yes, and it was, you know, in the natural way. It burned on the set in the natural way, yeah.
And Sean and Yura, I wanted to ask you about the home invasion scene, because I think the first time I didn't realize how much Igor never lifts a hand towards her. Not even once. You know, she runs into him, he tries to hold her down, but he never attacks her. And it's such a great detail that builds the relationship later on. And so how did the two of you kind of find the details of that scene together?
Well, we, you know, like with every actor, we talk about the scenes, we talk about what they'll be doing, not only physically in the scene, but what their character is processing in the moment. And it was actually, we got to originally in the first draft, it was actually Igor, who after getting hit in the face, doesn't want to be hit in the face again with the, it was the ring that caused the wound on his face, and he doesn't want that to happen again. So he's the one who actually takes her ring off, forcibly. We talked about this and we said it shouldn't be Igor who takes the ring off. It should actually be, should be Karin. Even when Karin says, instructs him, orders him to, he still won't. And I think that came from us just discussing, the scene and seeing what was appropriate and realizing that I was wrong with the first draft, that it wasn't an act that Igor would do.
Yeah, just sometimes it's characters. It's for me, it's real persons, and they borning and sometimes say that I don't want to do this, and it's like a children, They say that I don't want to do this. I want to do this, and it's like some kind of magic and you just have to listen them.
Well, I always cast with actors who I've just been extremely lucky. They're bringing not only amazing performances to the table, but they're bringing so many wonderful ideas, and there's a real collaborative thing going on with us in pre-production. And sometimes in those rehearsals leading right up to shooting, where we're all discussing this and seeing what is right for this, not only for the character but for the story ultimately. And I've been blessed to have this incredible cast that brought me so many ideas daily, sometimes hourly.
No, I think you always cast so incredibly, and obviously with this film as well. Mikey, I wanted to ask you about that sequence as well, because ANORA is so vulnerable when they come into the home. She's not even fully dressed. She's in a t-shirt. She doesn't have a chance to put any pants on in the moment. And we kind of see her at the beginning being very quiet and more demure and kind of sitting herself down on the couch, which is very different to the juxtaposition of her, screaming and trying to run out and kicking tables into people's faces. And so I was interested in just the build-up for you and kind of where you felt that shift change.
Well, I think, we couldn't start it off with her yelling and screaming at them or insulting them, because I think there needed to be an arc to that, because obviously that sequence is quite long and we didn't want it to get repetitive. We wanted to be specific about which moments are more heightened and how far we can push them, and then which moments are softer or different. And I think when they come in the house, yes, it's vulnerable, but I think she's starting to get an inkling that something is very wrong in her. She's, I think because of her work and what she does for a living, she's an intuitive person, and I think that she recognizes something is wrong, but she's waiting to see. And then obviously when she feels threatened, she's left alone with these complete strangers, these men that she has no idea what they're going to do to her. She doesn't know if she's going to die in that moment, and so she's going to fight for her life physically and verbally. And then I think there comes a point where she realizes what exactly is happening, and it becomes a different fight where she's fighting to save her marriage and the life that she feels like she's earned.
And Karin, Torres has clearly worked for this family for a long time, and it's fun to see all the different tactics that he tries to control ANORA. At the beginning, he's more aggressive, and he's like, he doesn't love you, he never has, he never will. And then he kind of starts to negotiate and be like, I'm your friend, I'm here to help you, this is what we're gonna do. And he's more aggressive at times. And so how did you set about just enjoying playing in the space of finding all the different ways that he tries to do his job?
Well, I was blessed to be surrounded by these talented actors, which whatever energy I projected to, I received the right energy back. So, he's definitely a smart cunning guy. He knows he's trying to find ways, the best way to approach the situation. And as I mentioned earlier, he's baptizing a child, so a sense of responsibility is deep in him. So he definitely doesn't want to kill or hurt. He wants to find a way to solve the situation the best way possible. And yeah.
And Sean and Mikey, there's so many wonderful details in terms of ANORA as a character that are these external details that tell us so much. You know, when she's in the club, the fact that you trained so extensively in pole dancing that you could do these really advanced moves upside down, even though we only see it in that one moment. The tinsel in the hair that kind of the hair designer created in tandem with you, the details on the nail with the butterflies, and, you know, even just the use of Russian and kind of like learning Russian rather than just learning the lines to be able to deliver those in the scene. And so I wanted to ask both of you about, you know, just the in-depth process of really leaning into researching, learning all these details, building the external aspects of a character, even if it's something that we only see for a brief moment on screen.
Sure. All of it was very important to me, because I wanted everything about her to be completely specific, because she was someone who is so different from who I am. I needed to go to all of those places to understand her, and also so that I can exist in that world and not stand out. Especially like you mentioned dancing. I'm the only woman in that club who is not a real dancer. And so I didn't want to seem like an actress. I wanted to seem like I'm a sex worker who has been working for at least a couple years, knows what she's doing, has all these tricks up her sleeve. And I think in those moments, even if it's a short moment, you get to see this rich history behind that. So that was really important. And then just all the other little details, I wanted it to be incredibly specific. And it was exciting for me as an actress to dive into that and do all of those things. And I felt that the character demanded it, and I wanted to do justice to that character and have her be a fully formed, fleshed out human. And yeah.
Yeah, detail is very important to me with all of my films. I always want to make sure that the communities that I'm focusing on will be, that audience will be, will say, you got it right, you know? And so that happens in many ways. Consultants, you know, our chief consultant on this film for the sex work side of things was Andrea Warehun, who wrote this wonderful memoir called Modern Whore, and it was about her experience as an escort and erotic dancer. So reading our script, telling us what was accurate, what wasn't, bringing the slang to the table. Slang is so important in all of my films. And I like to throw out words that I don't define, that if you're interested enough to figure out, you have to Google it later after the fact. Karin was our consultant for all things Armenian, you know, and then just really listening to, it takes time, you know, with all these films, you have to immerse yourself for a certain amount of time, especially if you're not from the subculture or the community that you're focusing on, so that you know you're getting it right, and listening to locals and just really making sure that the representation is accurate. And also my entire cast and crew knew this about me and understands, okay, so we're gonna go for the detail. You mentioned the tinsel, and Justine Sarakowski, who is our wonderful hairstylist, brought that to the table. And for a director, oh my God, that's the gift of a lifetime. Because number one, I haven't seen that before in film and TV, although I do hear it was in Beverly Hills Housewives or something like that. Right, but I never saw it before, and what it does is that it gives you a glint of light and our color palette literally in every frame of the film, because every time she moves her hair, every frame will give you another pop of color. You know, my making sure that we were shooting in the restaurant, like these iconic landmarks in Brighton Beach, like Tatiana's, and that billiard hall, which unfortunately is now closed, but we caught it on the last night. It was closing day that we shot there. You know, stuff like that's really important. And again, it's just really about everybody being on board and bringing that stuff to the table.
Absolutely. Mark, in terms of your character as well, he really comes across as someone who's quite lonely and has a lot of pain inside of him. The fact that his parents aren't around unless he's causing trouble, that's the only time that we see them show up for him. And I was curious how that led to a lot of your performance, because we see him going out and trying to party hard and trying to surround himself with people, and in a lot of ways trying to overcompensate for what he doesn't have in terms of close connections to people.
Yes, maybe I'm stupid, but what's the question?
No. It was just about like the way that you kind of viewed him as being someone who's quite lonely and has a lot of pain, and how that shaped a lot of the performance and the way that he overcompensates.
Yes, and the most interesting thing there is how we just shift, from one guy to another guy. So in ANORA, now it feels like this, that it's like 3 different movies, maybe more. Like first is a romantic comedy and Ivan, like a person from romantic comedy. Yes, and the second, it's a, road movie, and Ivan is disappearing. Okay, he's not from the road movie. Yes, and the third, this third part is like, but no, it's like, what? Drama, yeah, Igor's right, Yura. Yeah, and it was very interesting how to, build these bridges from the romantic comedy to drama, and how to, put inside the character these hints that he's not, just a good guy, that he had this, some trap inside him. Yeah, and we tried to do it, and it was a very interesting task. Yeah.
No, it's great because it brings a lot of vulnerability to his story as well. Sean, Mikey, and Yura, I wanted to ask you about filming that final sequence, because I think it's so emotionally vulnerable for both of these characters, and I know that there was a lot that went into filming this, and Mikey, I wanted to start with just asking you about the way that you kind of stepped into the headspace and found all those emotional layers, because I know that one of the things that you did was to listen to a voicemail that your dad had left you years ago that Sean played in the back of the car, and just how having something so personal shared with both of them also really helped you tap into the character in that moment.
Yes, I kind of regret talking about that, honestly. Because
Sorry.
I feel so embarrassed whenever it's mentioned, and my face is going to turn bright red soon. Yeah, no, it was a scene that we had tried to shoot for a few days, and the elements were just against us. And so we shot it over the course of a few days, and finally we're getting to the portion of the scene where it's this one long shot, and I think that I had in my head a specific idea of how the scene should go, or how I wanted it to go, which is, it's just not possible, and there's no way to act that way, because you're either honest to what the moment is, or you're not, and you can't imagine how you want a scene to go. You have to just try to feel what it is the character's going through, and also like harness your own emotions to be the vessel for that. And so I tried to do that as best as possible, but it was such an important scene for her, because for the entirety of the film she's constantly covering, not wanting anyone to see her crack, like what I said, and so much has been building up, so much emotions, and I think that it's like to have that release, even if it's a forced release, is cathartic in some ways, also very painful. Yes, but Yura was the perfect scene partner to have that scene with, was very supportive, and Sean was also there too, and so it was all 3 of us sitting in this car, and it's very like intimate in a way, because the director who is telling this story and is also there with us, sharing that moment. And
I'm in the back seat.
Yeah, he's in the back seat of the car. And I think we were able to get to a place where it felt honest, and it felt real, and yes, do you have anything to add?
What was your experience in filming that? Because there's so much care for ANORA that Igor has at that point?
What can I say? For me, men don't have to say something, just have to do something, you know.
And Sean, in filming that sequence,
Yeah.
what was important to you? Because I know that there was a movie reference point that you were pulling on as well in part of how you wanted to shape that.
But it wasn't that I was pulling. You're talking about Knights of Cabiria.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a very, I would say, just a very fortunate thing that happened, almost an unintentional homage to a film that, you know, in very many ways influenced this film. At the end of Knights of Cabiria, Julieta has a single tear, and in the take we use in this film, Mikey produced a single tear. But it's not like we had talked about that. I remember being in the back seat, looking up and over, you know, away from my monitor, and actually watching the two actors and seeing that single tear and saying, "Oh my God, that's so crazy that just happened." But also, going back to what we were talking about earlier with like the collaboration with my wonderful actors, you know, a lot really was ultimately figured out in rehearsals. And in the rehearsal, in my first draft, there were a few more lines. When Annie gets on top of Igor, they had a little more of an exchange there, a verbal exchange. And I think we just all, in our rehearsal, we all agreed, oh, there's no reason for anything more to be said, because they're saying it, they're finally communicating. Two people are finally communicating in this film, but it's being done non-verbally, and I think that's way more profound than my little awful dialogue that I probably had written. So it was that came from us working together, and I'm really happy about that.
It's a wonderful scene, and I love all the emotion in it. Well, the whole film is so great, and every single time I rewatch it, there's so many more details in all of your performances and all of the directing. So congratulations on an amazing movie. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming out tonight.